Hey everybody, Walter here. Welcome back to the Awesome Walter YouTube channel. Like I said in my last video, I really wanted to do some wrestling stuff culminating in the WrestleMania review coming up on probably Monday morning. It's WrestleMania week, so there's a lot of buzz around the show and everything. And I just wanted to talk about a book that I finally just finished last week that I got a while ago. It took me just a while to get through because I was, only reading it bit by bit. But JR's book, Jim Ross, My Life in Wrestling. It was a really good read. I was looking forward to this for a long time. I haven't been able to listen to his podcast for a while, The Ross Report, but it is a really good podcast. And remember, when I was listening to it more, he was building up his life story more and more and more that he was going to release in this book. So when I got it, I was very excited. Like I tweeted out a picture that I bought in JR. I liked the tweet, and I was very excited about that. So I thought that was really cool. But a lot of people consider JR the best wrestling announcer ever. I've only been watching wrestling since 2002, and I've done a hefty amount of research. I've gone back and watched a lot of old stuff, and I still do that. But a lot of people talk about Gordon Soley and Gorilla Monsoon and all these other older announcers before JR. And, I'm sure that, a lot of people back then who were watching back then still think maybe they're better than JR. But just from when I've started watching, and even before then, when I've extensively gone back and watched like a lot of the Attitude Era stuff, and a little bit before that, and including WCW stuff. And I just think JR, a lot of people would agree that JR is the best, if not, at the very least, one of the best of all time. And I got a lot of respect for the guy, just from listening to his interviews and stuff, and especially the Ross Report, like I mentioned. He seems like a really stand-up guy, and I really wanted to hear his story, his life in wrestling. So let's get into some of the stuff for it. I'll talk about a couple of the moments, the stories that he tells in it that stands out, and then I'll give you like an overview of my overall opinion at the end. So JR gets very candid in this book about his childhood and stuff. He talks a lot about his relationship with his dad, which is a main point that gets brought up a lot in a lot of different chapters in here. Even when he's not directly dealing with his father, he thinks about his dad a lot. There's a really kind of disturbing story that I'll get into here. When he was a young kid, they had a dog at their farm, and this dog had puppies. They kept one of the puppies, and when that puppy grew to adulthood, JR left one of the pens open or something because the other dog was in heat, and the son of the mom dog impregnated the mom dog. And that dog had puppies, so these inbred puppies. And JR's dad made him take the bag of puppies to like this dump and kill them with a hammer. Or destroy them, as he says. And he says he didn't want to do it. He's crying the entire time. He says dad was crying too, but he eventually did it. That is a rough thing for a kid to go through, isn't it? Man. But, that's the example of the kind of detail he goes into about his life and stuff. And not just the wrestling stuff. I mean, you get a really good sense of who he is as a person just reading through the book. And that was an early story that just got me right in the old heartstrings. So that's just one example, but there's a lot more, obviously, with wrestling coming up, too. A big aspect to the earlier parts of the book is his relationship with Bill Watts, who brought him into wrestling, basically. We get a lot of detail about how JR was sort of brought into that organization that Bill Watts was running, Mid-South and everything, and how it grew over the years. And the things that he did just to get in was, he was a huge wrestling fan growing up, and him and another friend were like promoting it through radio and stuff, and that was kind of his into Mid-South with Bill Watts and everything. So just seeing, reading about how he grew as a wrestling fan and then being involved in wrestling, and there's not a lot of people I could see out there who have more passion for the business than JR. I mean, he never wanted to be a wrestler. He just wasn't built for it, even though he did play, I think, was it high school football? I think he might have played some college football, but he wasn't really that kind of athlete to be in wrestling, but he loved it so much, he wanted to be involved, and his passion definitely shows through, especially in those early days that he talks about in the book. There's a kind of a funny / terrifying story when he got to WWF the first time, I think his first run. He was announcing with the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and I think Gorilla Monsoon once in a while, and he was backstage, and he was like producing some segments or something, and he was cornered in the hallway by Randy Macho Man Savage, and Macho Man like throws him against the wall and is like choking him, and I guess like somebody told him that, someone was messing with Macho Man's head and basically told them like a lie about JR or something. He was out to get him or something like that. But Macho Man like snapped on him, was like literally about to kill Jim Ross, and Gorilla Monsoon had to save him at the last second. That's a really tense, scary story. Macho Man was pretty, he wasn't just his character. I mean, he kind of lived his character, and that's what JR says too. So that just stuck out as something to me that was pretty crazy. He goes into detail and talks about his Bell's palsy attacks, which he goes into detail on both occasions. The first one, he didn't know what was happening, and then, you know, just, I think weeks later, or even less than that, he gets called into Titan Tower over in Connecticut, and Vince McMahon fires him. JR still seems to be confused as to why that happened, because, I mean, while the obvious thing is maybe he's an announcer, he can't be on TV with his, you know, it looks like he had a stroke at that point because the left side of his face was still recovering. But, you know, Vince never gave him a reason why that happened. But also at the same time, JR says that this was in the middle of the steroid scandal that was happening, where, you know, Vince McMahon was called to court to testify and stuff, and was being accused of distributing steroids to his talent and all that stuff. So I'm not really sure why Vince did that, but that kind of painted Vince in a bad light in that aspect of the story. But eventually, Vince brings him back kind of slowly. Like at first, JR was just doing like little shots for them here and there, and then Vince eventually hires him back. And we get a pretty good candid look at JR's relationship with Vince McMahon in this book. There's a story where he's riding with Vince, and he's like speeding like crazy, and he keeps farting in the book. I'm the best farter of all time, pal. Damn it, pal. Pal. It says pal a lot. And JR is like making fun of him and said, no, this other guy I knew back in Mid-South or something was a much better farter than you are. And then Vince McMahon just keeps farting louder and louder. Somehow that makes perfect sense. It just, you see the different sides of him from a lot of different angles through JR's perspective in like the middle and second half of the book and stuff. And we also get some good perspective from JR talking to Linda, Vince's wife. She says to not get too close to the flame. That was her advice to JR, to not get too close to Vince, which is an interesting thing to say about your husband. But I guess since he was such a workaholic, and yeah, Vince, I mean, still is. He's in his 70s, and he's still working as hard as he ever did. It just, you know, it's an example in the book that he never stops working. Vince McMahon is the definition of a workaholic, but 24/7, he's always doing stuff for the company. There's the instances where he would hire people. I think they brought in Bill Watts to run the wrestling side of things, where Vince wanted to do some more executive stuff, but eventually he got fired, and there's a lot of things shifting behind the scenes, but Vince just wanted to do everything. I mean, I think JR says in the book that if Vince could just clone himself a bunch of times, he would just do that and not hire anyone ever. So, yeah, I mean, that's not really a surprise considering what we know of how much of a hands-on approach that Vince has, especially in the current product, whether you like that or not. I mean, that's the truth. He talks about meeting The Rock for the first time and bringing in Stone Cold Steve Austin from WCW into the WWF, and his rise to being the most popular star of the Attitude Era and everything. And it's really interesting getting the backstage perspective, because he was talent relations at that point, so he's trying to like recruit younger guys. That was his whole mission statement at that point. He talks about his second Bell's palsy attack. It happened the same day his mother died, so maybe it was triggered by stress or something. He says that they still don't know what caused it. He was overseas in England, I think, calling a exclusive pay-per-view over there, and he found out about his mom's death, and while he was on air, he had another Bell's palsy attack and had to hold up the left side of his face just to pronunciate words. It's tough, man. I think he was home and kind of depressed for a while after that, until Vince McMahon sent him this really nice letter, and he prints out the whole letter in the book. But this all leads to the very end of the book, with JR coming back to announce the main event of WrestleMania 15, which is Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock for the WWF Championship. So he came back for that. He was so nervous because he hadn't been on camera since his second Bell's palsy attacks, and he was just doing the talent relations stuff backstage for a few months, I think, after that. So he talks about being backstage and looking in the mirror and being like scared shitless, basically, about going out there. And then, you know, it ends with him going out to call the match, and that was basically it. So I'm assuming we're gonna get another book from JR, hopefully within the next couple years, because there's a lot more that I would love to see his perspective on after, you know, WrestleMania 15. Obviously, you know, the Attitude Era is at the height right there, but it still keeps going for a couple years after that. And then I started, like I said earlier, I started watching wrestling in 2002, so I would love to hear his perspective on like Shawn Michaels' comeback, Hulk Hogan's comeback, all the things that changed from the Attitude Era, maybe his opinion on what happened with the World Wildlife Foundation, how they had to change WWF to WWE. It would be good to hear a lot of that kind of stuff. Bring in Brock Lesnar. A lot of, you know, Cena came in 2002. 2002 was a big year for the WWE at the time. So hearing how he maybe brought those guys in as head of talent relations back then, I would love to hear more stuff about JR and his journey through wrestling and everything. So if you haven't picked it up, it's still available online, of course. Jim Ross, My Life in Wrestling. I think you guys will enjoy it if you're a fan of JR, if you're a fan of wrestling in the Attitude Era, even if you've fallen off watching wrestling recently, which I can't really blame you for, this will still probably satisfy your appetite because it's mostly taking place, you know, it starts in like the late 70s with him in wrestling and then, you know, ends in the mid 90s with, or late 90s in the WWF at WrestleMania 15. So if you haven't picked it up yet and you're thinking about it, it's worth it. It's not too long of a book. It's like 300 something pages, I think. So it's a really good read. It's an easy read. It's not like a daunting task to take it over. I just had to, you know, do it little bits at a time. That's why it took me so long personally. But there's a couple excerpts in here, I think, from like Stone Cold. There's an afterword by Stone Cold. There's a foreword by Vince McMahon. So pick this up if you haven't, and if you're interested in hearing more about JR. It's a very good read. So I will be back here on Saturday with another wrestling video. I'll let you know what that is when it comes out. I don't want to ruin the surprise. And then probably Monday morning with a review of WrestleMania. So thank you guys for watching. I'm going to be doing some more wrestling videos coming up next week too. If not next week, then week after. I just want to do some more wrestling stuff. So let me know in the comments what you'd like to see wrestling-wise from me in these videos. But otherwise, I'll see you guys Saturday. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and share the video. Ring that bell. I'll talk to you guys later. I'll see you Saturday, and thanks for watching.